experience meter. If you're able to, using your fingers, can you please show how many different data sources are you currently managing for AI machine learning initiatives? Can you just lift your hands up and show it to me? Many. We have like 10, 4, 5. Okay. I'll just skip this. So if you ever wondered what sets apart the organization truly winning with data and scaling AI with confidence, and what the key ingredients are to get there, you're in exactly right room for this. This will be a level 200 session, and please welcome Jason Hunter to the stage.
Hey, hi everyone. Nice to see so many people here for today's session on building high-performance data foundations for AI success. By way of name, I'm Jason Hunter. I'm a principal technology strategist and part of our global data and AI strategy team. Now, a bit of an agenda for today. I'm going to walk you through a little bit about the evolution of how organizations have had to change their model for being more BI-centric to architectures which are now infused with AI. I'll also talk a little bit about the importance of strategically aligning your own data and how it flows across your organization and how that actually relates to your own business architecture. I'll talk about some implementation strategies and then also some architecture framing as well, and then talk a little bit about how AWS is helping customers like yourselves, not only from a technology point of view, but also from some of the programs that we have. Now, before I look forward and take you through that journey, I think it's interesting to run you through on how data has really evolved a little bit over the last decade and a half to really set the stage for where we are today. Now, some of you might remember the golden era of big data, so kind of in the early 2010s. This was when it was easy to collect data of any kind of structures and at any kind of velocity. And the value that you had here is that you could land the data in its natural form and then create logical models of that data without having to physically model it. And so what this allowed is for organizations back then to experiment a lot faster, because it was easier to get access to more data that was typically harder to get access to. And what this actually drove was an uptake further in business intelligence as well. And the reason for that was because now organizations could get access to much more data that was traditionally opaque to them. And so during this boom time, we now knew more information about our customers. We knew how they were interacting with our products and services. And then at the same time, because we had now such a large variety of data, we could create machine learning models. And then so we went through this era of building various types of predictive models, such as forecasting, propensity models, and of course recommender models. And so during this time now, we could have deeper experiences and communications with our customers because we knew so much more about them. We could send emails to them about products and services that we knew would be of interest to them. And then here we are today with generative AI, which is forcing organizations to really change and rethink about their strategies again as well. One of the key things, if we look through this as well, is that with the generative AI and the agents, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about them today, is that as builders and as designers and architects, we are no longer just designing pipelines for people in the business. We're designing pipelines and really now ecosystems for people, but also machines. Now, I spoke about how data strategies have had to evolve, and they still continue to do today. So the journey has been, as we went through that era that I just spoke about, operating models were forced to change because environments were no longer gated by a single IT team or a single monolithic data warehouse. Suddenly your analytics stack consisted of multiple different databases and APIs and multiple different sources as well. And then because of that, and because there was more capabilities and technology and tools coming on board, more people wanted to get access to that data because they knew it had value. And then because of that tension, operating models had to change. People wanted access to different tool sets and they wanted ownership because they knew this data. And then so, this is where people were more concerned around the autonomy. How can we have access to the data and have ownership across that? And then of course, making sure that your designs and your investments were future-proof and resilient as well. So the key thing here is that when you are designing your architectures as well, back then and even still to this day, always in your mind you should be thinking, how can we accommodate what we have now for the future, for the other personas in our organizations that we know that will come, and for the other technology that will arrive as well. So an example that I normally give to customers here is in 2013 there was the rise of the, at that stage, formative title of a data scientist. With that Venn diagram, right, it was a bit of a unicorn back then where they obviously needed to know maths and stats, very statistical by nature. They had to have extensive domain knowledge as well, and then also be a genius computer programmer. What a time it was to find those type of candidates. And then it's no longer good enough just to have data. It needs to be contextualized of value and be able to be delivered in the right format at the right time for the right personas and people in your organization. And you can't do this in reality without having a level of automation and AI infused in your architecture across your business. Now, even with a clear data strategy in place, and if you have these ingredients, this is kind of what we call a modern data architecture. But the one thing that we have observed and witnessed as well is you can't run a modern data architecture on top of a legacy or a misaligned operating model. And this is kind of backed up by Conway's law. And the fact is that most architectures that organizations design is actually most of the time a reflection of their communication structure. And so what this really means is that if you have teams that are working on use cases in your organization towards building out capability for your data and AI platform, if those teams are working in silo, or if they're misaligned, or they're working towards different outcomes, the data platform that is a result of that will be very fragmented. If you get fragmentation, then you can't deliver the value or scale it out because of the misalignments. Now, organizations that are winning with data and AI are ones that know this and really anchor down on people, process, and technology. And the reality is, data is a team sport. And so when we work with customers and we have a look and we audit and say which ones are really succeeding and doing well in this area, they have a lot of these ingredients that you can see there. And so from a people perspective, they have that alignment across key business and technology stakeholders. They have the right structures as well. So the right roles that you have. And even when customers are starting out, even if they don't have full-time personnel in those roles, we see them having one or two persons assuming that role. And that might be because they know that they have to adjust the policies, things around data governance and those types of things as well. And so just having a person or a group of personnel in your organization thinking about these things now is what you have to do. And then obviously process is utterly important as well. Understanding where you are now from an operating model and where you want to get to, because there will be steps that you'll have to go through, right? So if you are, say, as an example, one of those monolithic applications, and a real example would be the data mesh paradigm, which most people would have heard of. That would be a great destination, democratize data, have separate domains and teams actually running autonomously. But that might not be your starting point, right? It's a journey. And so it's basically making sure that you can understand where you are and the steps that are required to get there. And then there's technology. And technology is your execution engine here. And so your architecture, the technology that you have, needs to be able to support the direction of travel for your organization, considering key aspects of your business. People's, your skills, your current investments as well. None of these can succeed in isolation though. You can't over-index in one. You really need to find that unification across these three capabilities for this to work. So what are some of the key aspects now to consider towards designing your data architecture? Well, one thing I've started saying to customers is that we should rethink the data platform. It's not just a technology infrastructure investment. Hugely important, absolutely. But I suggest we change the mindset and think about it as what it affords the organizations like yourselves. And that is, it's really a business operating system. And just like a desktop class OS, it gives you those core capabilities around having storage, indexing, security, being able to discover those assets. There'll be a kernel that's the kind of compute that's marshalling all of these technical capabilities together. And then one of the key things is they have a UI shell. And that UI shell is the interface, the consumption between the technical capabilities that you have in your organization and how they interact with the various personas and people in your organization. And so just like a desktop, you should have different skill levels of personas in your organization to use the tools that are right for their part of the business and are right for their skill set as well. I sometimes talk when my colleague and I run these interactive workshops for one of our customers. One of the key things that we try to understand is the tools and the capabilities that our customers have. And one of the things that I tend to say to them a lot is, you need to understand, as an example, what is the data love language of the people within your organization, right? Understanding the interfaces and the tools that people use is fundamentally important to drive success in your organization. Long gone really are the days where the suggestion for the architecture is a notebook and here's a Python language or maybe Apache Spark. That works for your technical teams, but it doesn't work for others as well. And so because of this, I suggest when you're considering your architectures to consider this as a two-layer architecture approach. And so on the top, as you can see there, this is all focused on how does your organization use data? How does it flow and how is it actually activated? And then the really important part in there is understanding and doing an audit around the organization as a whole from the business and the technical users. Because the anti-pattern is to build an academically pleasing technical architecture that is incompatible with the wider business. And so what you want to do is, as you are going through the design considerations of your architecture, you want to grab as many people in your organization as you can and bring them on the journey. So they might not be technical and they may have existing applications and tools that they use. And you want to make it so that even if they are still using those tools, they can be able to understand what data exists in the organizations and how to get access to that. And that might not be where they end up, but at least they can get the value out of the platform and be part of that journey. And then from there you can work out and show and incentivize them and give them examples of how they can upskill and transition to what is something that would be a better approach for them as well. So, I talk about capabilities and on-ramps, right? And this is fundamentally important. Now there's a couple of kind of generalized personas as well, and so one is the technical user that's very analytical minded, right? Their requirements are they need access to a wider array of data, curated and uncurated as well, and then they need access to different tool sets, a larger array, frameworks and so on, and a little bit more self-service autonomy. Then you've got the kind of the business analysts or the executives. They're more interested in the last mile analytics. I just want the data, I want the facts. If they are getting access to data in a tabular form, it is going to be in a form which is more curated and aligned to how the business actually works. So if you're thinking about from a data model perspective, it won't have any of the nuances of like attributes that you would have from the various source systems. It will be data which is modeled in a way, such as entities, of how, based off the taxonomy and the language that you use across your organization as well. Now there's a new persona as well, which may not be surprising at all, but there's the AI agent, right? So I alluded to the fact that when we're designing these architectures, it's always been for business users and how they can interact. And so this is actually an emerging standard, and this is by, no one is surprised, I guess, by this or unaware of the value of generative AI and agents as well. But what has been a little bit amiss is that as organizations have been going through and working on building out these use cases, they've been leaving some of the value on the floor, so to speak. And so we know that there's differences with agentic AI and the different interfaces that they need access to. So regardless if you are building an agentic AI now, if you're just working through a business use case, I am suggesting that everyone should be planning for that level of automation of large language models and generative AI in your organization. Now, the one kind of unique aspect with, I guess, this persona here is that the agent itself can straddle both of those personas. So in some cases, you have agents which are working in the back office or in the platform, analyzing the data, looking for anomalies, creating summarizations, workflows, non-deterministic things, and then also working as an assistant to people in the front office, right? So creating those reports, those executive summaries, and those data stories as well. So one way to think about this is in your mind is a bit of a mental model as I build this out. This is really just a capability diagram that shows the kind of key aspects that you should consider for the core data platform elements. And in here, what you see here is really just a representation of the data value chain, right? So consider, how can we collect the data, how can we store it, how can we secure it, how can we govern it, and then importantly, how can we publish that as well? So everyone in the business can go and understand what data exists. Now across these layers, this is where, once you've audited your business architecture, you can then select what is right for your organization. So for instance, down at the bottom, there's various data stores. The typical ones, you'll have a data lake and a data warehouse, but then you might have something around a graph database, as an example, or a NoSQL database. And so just having that value where you can have these different data stores from your operational systems that are augmented with your analytical environments gives you a lot of flexibility and power, because as a designer you can then decide on what system is best to use on a price performance, but also just from a modeling point of view and how you think the organization will need to use it. And so as you go up these capabilities, you have different services that you'll use for data processing, for the governance aspects, how you access that through APIs. In that data services layer, you can see it's got an example of model context protocol. So if we were building a way to access a data store or a capability, why don't we do that now? Why don't we create interfaces for MCP? Because we know that there will be value in this data source that we actually have now. So let's accommodate future builders to do that. Now, from here, this is where you start to overlay your business architecture. So for the most part, this is just configuration now. So if we want to accommodate for self-service models, that's really just configurations around who can get access to infrastructure components depending where you are, who can get access to the various catalogs, and who can have ownership. So can I go through and delegate to a member in our team or a domain in the organization and just push that to them and say, you own that. You own that data coming in, you own the policies on how we validate that data from a technical point of view and also from a business validation point of view, and then you write the rules on who can get access to this data as well. And then on top of this, you start layering capabilities for workloads and use cases in your organizations. And then on top of that, you have obviously AI agents and workflows. The point of this blueprint is to show that as you build through new use cases and you add on different personas and new technology comes on, these are just additive to the existing design that you already have in your organization. And for instance, you can see that there's app serving there. So when I spoke about those 3 personas before, they are not running on 2 or 3 different environments. They're not creating other applications that are hosted elsewhere. They're all running across this data foundation that you've actually built out, which is your business operating system. And so how do you move from here to production or into the start of either your data infrastructure or to a change that you're looking to build out? And so what you need to bridge that gap is to make sure that you have that alignment across the organization. So again, business and technology. Because we can't do this in isolation. We all need to be swimming in the right and same direction. Also suggest assessing your readiness. So we, one of the programs loosely touch on at the end, but we help customers do a data strategy diagnostic. And so what that does is audit a number of pillars across your business domains and your technology domains to understand where you are. And the output of that is to, and the value is to celebrate where you are doing really good things, but to also identify where there's opportunities and where there's gaps. Because you want to understand what those are now, and if they are critical of nature, obviously resolve them beforehand before you can move forward. And then critically as well, to make sure this isn't academic, when we see customers building out and changing their architectures, we suggest you start small and scale fast. Because you don't know what you don't know, and especially if this, and for the most part, this is a transformation exercise in your organization. And to remove this from being an academic exercise, you want to get those signals really quickly. And so what we suggest is have a meaningful use case, something that you want to do. It's not a POC. We know the tech works. What we really want to tease out is what are those gaps? What do we need to change across the governance, maybe the structures, maybe the capabilities and the tool sets, and then look to deliver that within 60 to 90 days. From there, we call this the first turn of the data flywheel. So you are delivering something of value, and as an example, when I've worked with customers to do this, their North Star is an agentic agent, customer support. It's doing a lot of great things for them, but to start with first, what they want to do is just have a propensity model to know more about their customer, and something for their call center agents now, where they'll be able to have a propensity score or a summarization of what has actually happened with the 5 previous calls that customer has actually had as well. And so that would be the first turn, and then each additional iteration of that, you're extending that. And if you think back to that capability, that model that I showed before, each time you do an additional turn of that flywheel, you are adding additional capabilities or changes to policies across all of those layers. Do we already have a purpose-built store to hold this data? Yes, we do. Do we have a permission model for this use case that we're delivering? Yeah, we do. Like, it's 90% the way there, but because there's a slight adjustment around this programmatic access to this tool, we just have to create a new permission structure for that. And so what you find is the more that you build these use cases out iteratively, then there's less new concepts that you're building in your platform, and it just becomes configuration. All right, so what are some considerations for your business operating system? So there's 2 dual interfaces now as you're designing your workloads or your use cases. And so the first is the business interaction. So this is what I suggest we're all probably doing today as well. So understanding the tools, the skill levels of people in your organization, the access to your data, right? This fundamentally is table stakes now. But anchoring on those personas and those on-ramps, right? This doesn't work if we don't cater for everyone in the organization. This is how organizations are actually really winning. They're pushing data to the people in the organization, the teams, the domains, however that looks for you now, so that they can win on their customers' behalf. But then we have the agent interactions. Mostly this is programmatic, right? It's under the covers, it's API based, it's contextualized. And so you'll either mostly be working across one or the other of these, but I suggest now even if you aren't doing something agentic, but I suggest that most people would be, start to plan for this. So an example of what this looks like on AWS. So the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we can unify the data. Like, this is one of the hardest things and that we hear from our customers a lot, is that it's just that we don't know where the data is to start with. And then even if we do, it's really hard to get access to. And that's because at the beginning of the session, I spoke about teams doing things which are misaligned and fragmented, and that's what their platform has become. And the worst thing is their permission models don't even match now. So it's very hard to get access to data. So on AWS, we have a service called Amazon SageMaker, for instance, which makes this very easy for customers. And so the first part is we talk about having connecting your data lakes and your operational and analytical stores together. And so Amazon SageMaker implements, and I think most people will know this, but a lakehouse architecture, which is where you combine your data warehouses and your data lakes together through a single lens. And so we do this through using an Apache Iceberg Open API REST-based standard. So there's an API, any other Apache Iceberg clients that support that standard can also get access to the catalog. And then on top of that, we use one of our governance and permission services, AWS Lake Formation, which gives you that single pane of glass of security across your data assets. Now, you're probably saying this is great from an analytics point of view, but we know our data is everywhere else. And of course, we want to make that easy to bring into your environments as well. Not only into your analytics environment, but to make it easy to understand what exists and through the catalogs. And so using Zero ETL is one method that we have at AWS. With your operational and real-time application systems that you have in your organization, you could use Zero ETL, where we actually create a managed pipeline to bring that data in to your analytics environment. You can still do it yourself, but for the sources, AWS services that support that now, we make it really easy. We can manage that whole pipeline for you. But then there's also your external data sources, right? Your third-party systems, your CRP, your ERP and your CRM systems, right? You still need access to them as well. And so this model also supports different ways of accessing that data. So whether that is federated or what we call zero data sharing as well. So you can have different modalities or access patterns on where that query is actually run. Are you bringing that data into your analytics environment, or are you running that query at source and then just getting the result set? You can choose the model that is best for you, for the system where that data is coming from, and for your use case. So now that you have the opportunity to get access to the data, you apply your governance rules and permission models, then you layer on top of that kind of data processing. And in here, the takeaway is that you can see a number of frameworks and languages and tool sets that you can use. At our keynote yesterday, our VP spoke about some of the key primitives that customers enjoy on AWS. And in here, you can just choose the right compute instance that you need for your use case. If it's a big data workload, you can scale out and use very distributed environments to bring that data in. And then once the data has landed, you can use a ETL or a processing framework that is right for your organization. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. So some organizations are running various frameworks and tools which are based on the use case, the data that's coming in, and for the teams that are actually running it. Now, after that, there's the Amazon SageMaker catalog. So this is where you take your processing, you take your assets, and your assets could literally be a data asset, but it could also be a machine learning model. And this is where you then publish into that catalog, and it will be decorated with information about the data, the lineage, the quality aspects that have been recorded as the data has been ingested in, and then you overlay the permissions on that. So will I create this data set and make it where when somebody subscribes, they get immediate access to it? Or does it have to be gated where somebody in my team or the domain have to approve it? But once you do, you will get access to it, and then you can use the tool of choice. And so with this core data platform foundation that you've actually built now, you can see the different consumption methods. So your business operating system, right? This allows you to then layer on different tools for different use cases. So whether it's a development environment, whether it's a low code or no code environment that you have, or it's hosting your data products, or you have agentic agents running across it. It's all coming from the same platform. So what does it look like as an example if we just apply some of those personas now? So from an agentic agent, in this example it's a process flow where we're going through and getting access to the data catalog. The employee workflow is well understood. We'll log into a portal, I'll type in some kind of keywords that I'm interested in, and I'll get a list of data assets. I'll have a look and I'll read that, I'll have a look at the quality in those aspects, and then I'll just choose to move along or subscribe to that. The agent, and this is the good thing, right? We want to utilize the investments that we've got in the existing architectures and process flow. So it's not wildly different for the agent, except they're not going to the user interface. They're going through a programmatic API, and they'll be using the same API as well, but the search semantics will be slightly different. Because like large language models, and especially anyone that's done any prompt engineering, we need to give them context. And so part of that context would be and should be decorated as additional metadata attributes for your data catalog. So putting in hints for the agents, saying whether or not if this data asset, as an example, would be good, or why it's good for certain use cases. And then also giving it hints, such as if this asset relates to a data warehouse or a lake, here are some specific SQL statements that you could actually run. So trying to understand now what are those additional insights and context we could provide for our customers. Now if I have a look at the first personas, just to show how the value is afforded from the platforms. For the executive user, they could be using Amazon QuickSight, using Amazon Q for Amazon QuickSight, and this is where they have a graphical environment. It allows you to create the dashboards and everything else, but for them they just want to use natural language. And so in Amazon Q for QuickSight, it will create those narratives for them automatically. No code required, they don't have to do any data modeling or create any visualizations. If you want to scale this out through the rest of the organization, we have Amazon Q for Business. And so this is a chat-based interface that can run across your organization. It can connect to your data sources and your systems. So I could have somebody that is asking questions around sales performance and also raising a ticket at the same time through the same interface. And then I have somebody from finance that wants to create a forecast model. Instead of doing it on their desktop now, they could use Amazon SageMaker Canvas, which is another low-code interface application service that we have, where it can automatically understand the problem to be solved. It's a forecast model. It will understand what is the best algorithm to use and then create that model for them. And then of course you have all of the consumption layers on the top. The final one is, what does that look like for the kind of technical audiences? And so here, if we're creating agents themselves, we might be using Amazon Bedrock to do that, and using SageMaker Unified Studio to get access to the data, have that unified lens to that, and then experiment with the models, the performance, the token count, and then create the agents as well. If I needed to dive in to something that was more specific around data science, as an example, or if I wanted to have more levers around the models that we're building, I would use Amazon SageMaker AI. And then of course we need somewhere where we can host all of this. And again, this is all on the same infrastructure, right? And so we could be using containerization and Amazon EKS to host the apps that we've built. So I promised to talk a little bit about how AWS is helping with various other programs as well. And we have a number of them that you can see up on the screen. If you have connections with SAs or account managers or anyone else that you see around here, and I'll be hanging back at the end if anyone has any questions as well, just talk to any of us to find out more about these programs and who to talk to see if they are right for you. A lot of them, as we talk through, you can see there's a data strategy diagnostic one at the end, and then we have ones that we run for our customers to run through that process of helping you build out and define that MLP and delivering that, that use case within 60 to 90 days. So that's it for today. You guys have been wonderful. Appreciate your time here, and please have a look and scan and give us feedback. I'd love your feedback on this, and thanks for being here.